Call the Winnebago County Public Works Committee meeting to order, 6 p.m., April 14th. Present is myself, Dave Tassoni, Bert Gurl, David Kelly, and Jim Webster, and Carlos Molina, engineer from the Highway Department. And I would first move to approve the minutes from March 3rd. Ask for a second on that. Seconded by Dave Kelly. And I would ask if there's any corrections, deletions, or items that need to be addressed with that.
Nope.
None? Seeing none, approval of the minutes of March 3rd have been approved. Secondly, I'll forego public comment section, being that there is no public comment tonight. And first item on the agenda would be, and if I'm correct, does it start out on number 5, Carlos, would be item 20-010?
That's correct.
Okay, and that is a resolution authorizing the execution of intergovernmental agreement between the County of Winnebago and the Village of Roscoe for the purpose of completing traffic and intersection design study for the intersection of Rockton and Willowbrook Road section, a cost of $38,200 total, $19,100 to the county. And I would so move.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Gurl and Mr. Kelly. Carlos would like to speak to that.
Sure. This is so that we can conduct a traffic study, including an intersection design study at Willowbrook and Rockton Road. As you know, we discussed in the past, there's a lot of congestion at that intersection due to all the retail and commercial development, especially gas station and truck stops that are been happening at that intersection and being so close to the interstate. So this would allow us to you know, get prepared and plan for the future, so that hopefully in the future we have you know, we can look for funds to do an improvement in that area.
Okay, did you have your hand up, Mr. Kelly? No? Okay. Any other comments or discussion on that item? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the motion passes. Moving on, next item is resolution 20-011. It's a resolution authorizing the execution of a preliminary engineering services agreement with Fairgram and the appropriation of MFT funds for the purpose of completing traffic intersection design study for the intersection of Rockton and Willowbrook. Is that a duplicate or is that an addition?
That Dave, if I may, that is the actual agreement with the engineering company, with the engineering firm. The resolution before was the agreement with the Village of Roscoe, so that we could participate in the cost.
So those go together, and then again, I would so move item 20-011. Seconded by Mr. Kelly. Would you like to speak to that as well, Carlos?
Again, this is just the agreement with the engineering companies, so that we can conduct that study. The engineering company is Fairgram and Associates. And again, it's for $38,200, of which the county would pay 50%, and the Village of Roscoe would pay 50%, $19,100.
Is there, would that, after this resolution passes, would that engineering studies and design start in the near future?
That's correct, after we take it to county board next week.
Okay. All in favor on that resolution?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the resolution passes. Next item on the agenda is a resolution 20-012, and it's a resolution authorizing the award of a bid for the 2020 county general letting. Bids to be distributed. I think we got that previously. I would so move.
I'd second.
Second by Mr. Gurl. Carlos, you want to give us a briefing on that?
Yeah, this is what we do every year about this time of the year, is where we go out for bids for the, what we call the general letting, and that includes all the materials that we purchase to maintain our highways. We opened bids this past Monday, and the numbers, the dollar amounts are similar to what we've received in the past.
Okay. Any questions or concern on that topic?
No, I'm okay with that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the resolution passes. Next item on the agenda is Resolution 20-013, which is a resolution authorizing the appropriation of the MFT funds for the maintenance of the county highways. And I would so move.
Second.
Second by Mr. Gurl. And I would assume, Carlos, does this go hand in hand with the prior?
That's correct. And in addition to that, this is where we include our labor and equipment so that we can charge MFT, for every time that our guys go out and maintain roads, we can charge it to MFT. So that's in addition to the general lighting, this includes that labor, equipment, and some other services.
Okay. Any questions or comments on that item?
Nope.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Resolution passes. Next item on the agenda is Resolution 20-014, which is a resolution authorizing the award of bids for culvert replacement on Montague and Kishwaukee roads. I so move.
Second.
Second
by Mr. Gurl. Carlos?
We went out for bids this past Monday and received 3 bids for the pipe culvert replacement on Kishwaukee and Montague Road. In the near future, this year, we're going to come back with another bid for the actual resurfacing of those roads. So this is just to replace the old culverts before we actually resurface the road. And the low bid was N-Track.
Any questions or comments on this item?
Nope.
Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Resolution is approved. Next item on the agenda is Resolution 20-015. It's a resolution authorizing the execution of preliminary engineering services agreement with Willett Hoffman and Associates and the appropriation of MFT funds for the purpose of completing contract plans for culvert repair on East Riverside Boulevard. I so move.
I'll second.
Seconded by Mr. Webster. Carlos?
Yep, this is this is that culvert on Riverside Boulevard just east of Forest Hills Road, the one where last fall we had to put some steel plates because the top had some holes on it. So what this will do, we're hiring a structural engineer so that we can do the repairs. This is just for the actual structural engineering. But as part of this resolution, we're also appropriating MFT funds so that we can do, so we can pay with MFT funds for the engineering, the structural engineering, and also for the actual replacement of the structure or the repair of the structure once we have it approved by IDOT.
Okay, any questions or comments on that item?
Nope.
Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Resolution is approved. Next item on the agenda is Resolution 20-016. It's a resolution authorizing the award of bids for the 2020 Township Seal Coating Program, and I would move.
I'll
Second.
second.
Seconded by everybody. Carlos?
This is where we assess the townships in Winnebago County, where we prepare the plans and the proposals and the bid packets and all that for the township so that they can go out and seal coat the roads. They do that with a contractor. The townships pay for this, but this is part of what we do, and we help them out that way. And the county board by state statute has to award the contract. But again, there's no dollars coming out of the county. It's all by the townships. Out of the 14 townships, 12 of them are participating this year.
Okay, any questions or comments on that item? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, Carlos, would you like me to handle the last resolution in a certain manner, or just read it in and move to approve as we should?
The last one is for the award of bid, but the actual
Yes.
rejection.
Was that something we were gonna reject, or?
Right, it's because the bids came out too high. And,
Okay, so you want me to move to approve and then us all to vote it down?
you know, there was another resolution that was sent out to reject the bids.
Okay, but it's the same item, correct?
It is for the same items. I think John Giliberti is on. I don't know how he wants us to read it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's fine. That's fine. You could go ahead and just take the resolution that's before you to reject.
So should I just motion and second it and move to reject it?
Yes,
Is that appropriate?
that's fine, Dave.
Okay, we'll try it out. If there's something you want to interject on, feel free to. Next item on the agenda is Resolution 20-017. It's a resolution authorizing the award of bids for Perryville Road patching from Daimler Road to south of Harrison Avenue, and I so move.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Girl, and like I say, with if you saw in a secondary email, we would like to reject the bids regarding this item, and I would move to reject.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Girl, and like I say, an I vote would move to reject all bids.
Yes.
Aye.
All in favor of rejecting?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. I guess on 20-017 has been approved to reject all bids. Moving on to other matters and reports. Carlos, what do you got?
Right, I just wanted to add before I get to reports that we are actually, I'm hoping that within the next month, we're gonna come back with another, because, you know, that work needs to be done. We're just gonna have to change our approach a little bit so that we can actually award a bid to do those repairs on South Perryville Road. So moving on to the reports, the first item, it's kind of wanted to let you know, this is just an estimate, nobody knows yet what the financial impact of the coronavirus will be on the highway department. Because as you know, most of our funds come out of MFT funds, and with people driving less, we might end up not receiving as much revenue for the month or months that people are staying home. As you might remember, we get about $500,000 a month on MFT funds. So if people drive 50% less, we would, lose 250,000. So this is just kind of wanted to bring it to your attention because that might be the case this year. And hopefully, when things go back to normal, we go back to receiving the full $500,000. We just checked on the allotment by the state for the month of March, and there wasn't much of a change in March, but I expect that there will be some in the month of April. We will know in the first few days in May, and then I'll report to you.
Carlos, can I interrupt you for a minute there? I see the chairman left his seat, but I don't know if John Gilberti could speak to this or the chairman, if he can hear us in there. Is it possible that any of the reimbursement funds coming out of the feds would help offset some of the wages pertaining to the stay-at-home orders and, what the county offices are doing?
That'd be a good question.
Yeah,
for
Mr. Chairman.
Chairman.
Yeah, so I am not aware. I do know that a part of the stimulus that came out was for counties and municipalities, 500 in communities of 500,000 and up. We're obviously below that threshold. So that is just the grouping. That is something we're going to have to work on. There's talk of a fourth stimulus package. I'm not aware of that. We can check on what the latitude would be. Since I have the floor, I'll throw this one additional nugget since it's Public Works. I talked to Chairman Jack Franks out of McHenry over the weekend, and he was talking to federal folks about if there was a way in the future through the stimulus thing to get some help on capital projects that would allow the county, his county, to offset future, money's fungible. You could do it the proper way where dollars are offset for capital and then it would create funds elsewhere. I don't know, but to answer your question specifically, I do not believe that's the case. We can check into it a little more closely.
All right, well, thank you for that input. Turn it back over to you, Carlos.
Thank you.
All right, the next item that I wanted to report on is an application for the Illinois Department of Commerce. It's an application for a grant. There's an opportunity there, and then I actually discussed briefly with the chairman where R1PC can actually do this application, because there's got to be some economic studies this is for the Riverside Boulevard corridor. As you recall, we, in order to do that large improvement there, we got to do a phase 1 engineering report. So there's an opportunity here that we might be able to get, some money to do that phase 1 engineering, which could amount to about $1.5 million. I'm not saying that we will get that amount, but there's a chance of getting some of that. 1PC can do this application for a little bit less under $3,000. So I, with everybody's okay, I would like to, do that with R1PC. Our county's purchasing ordinance allows the department heads to for an amount for a service under $5,000 to go ahead and sign this agreement with this particular agency. So if you guys are okay with it, I would like to proceed with that.
I'm
Good.
fine with it.
Good by me, for sure.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Anytime you can find money.
Yeah, let's hope so. And that R1PC, those guys are pretty good at doing that. So I think there's a good opportunity there to leverage our dollars. The next item that I have here on my report is the I-39 Baxter Road update. As you may have seen a press release, IDOT started that work, about a week or two ago. They've already done the repairs or resurfacing on Baxter Road by the bridge there over I-39. They also did the ramps coming into Baxter Road. The temporary traffic signals at the ramps and at the intersection with 251 are already in place. And then I'll keep you updated and see when they're gonna move traffic from, some of the traffic from I-39 to Baxter Road. As you recall, that was one of the detour routes that they will have for passenger vehicles. The next item is I wanted to give you an update on the Baxter Road project. This is the project that we want to do from I-39 to Mulford Road, where we have done we're trying to do it with a bond that Steve Chapman is working on. We are going out for bids on Monday, next Monday, the 20th. So what I would like to do, if it's okay with everybody, just because of the time frame, you might recall that we have to have this contract under contract by June. So I'd like to move this along. So if it's okay with you, I'd like to have a special meeting of the Public Works Committee just before County Board next week on the 23rd. So maybe 15 minutes before the County Board. If that's okay with you, I would like to schedule that so that we can award that construction contract.
That's fine with me. You just get it worked out with IT, make sure they know about it.
All right, we'll do that. Tollway Bridge projects update. Remember, there's a couple bridges over I-90, the Rockton Road Bridge and the Elevator Road Bridge that Tollway is going to be working on this year. The Rockton Road is the one with some issues on the deck. They're gonna start working in the beginning of May. And, that's where they're doing those full depth repairs to the deck. So they're gonna start in the beginning of May. gonna last about 2 months. And then sometime in early July, they're gonna start the elevator road project. Again, there's some structural repairs that they gotta do to that bridge. That's the one that the lanes have been reduced because of some damage that was caused on the south side of that deck. So again, in beginning of May and the beginning of July, when those two projects will start. And the last thing that I have is the Glenwood States subdivision. It's a subdivision that started back in 2008 in Roscoe Township, right off of Y School Road. It was there was 2 homes that were built there, but then with the economy and the housing crash back in the 2008 timeframe, it wasn't finished. So there was there is somebody who's trying to purchase that property and develop it or finish the development. And they contacted us. However, when that first development went into the ground, it was done by a pre-annexation agreement with the village of Roscoe, even though it is in unincorporated Winnebago County. So just to keep you on the loop and giving you a heads up, the village of Roscoe is the one that has to deal with that development because of the pre-annexation agreement. Even though in the future, maybe the township of Roscoe is going to have to maintain the roads, but it is the village of Roscoe who's dealing with it. Again, just to give you a heads up. And the last thing that I have is, one of the things that we've been doing in the last few months is, working with ComEd to get some rebates on transferring some of our street lights to LEDs. So we just got another check of about close to $5,000 from ComEd for, a portion of Riverside Boulevard where we switched our street lights to LEDs. And as you know, we're going to keep doing that for not just street lights, but also some of the lights that are on our signalized traffic signals. We have about 2 or 3 other projects that we've applied to ComEd, so we're going to get some money back. And that's all I have for reports.
All right, Carlos. Hey, Mr. Chapman,
Yes, sir.
could you just out of curiosity and something that came up, what are we doing for signatures on resolutions? Is it just a stamp, or is there anything that needs to be done in the future?
Well, I think initially we had retained the resolutions up in the county board office, but I think we've just been going ahead and processing them through the board as long as they've been approved by the board. So really, there's been no signatures on the different resolutions.
Yeah, okay. And for my thought is if someone needed to write a yes or no after they reviewed video, maybe that's sufficient. I don't know. Just was a thought.
Yeah, maybe we need to explore that. I guess depending upon how long we continue these meetings. So.
Okay, all right. Well, thanks for that input. Is there anything else from the Public Works Committee? I see Mr. Kelly's hand up. And Jim, if you got anything, then Mr. Kelly.
Yes, I recently sold a couple of my rental houses. Realtors have a way of doing it, of signing documents over the internet.
Yeah, electronic signatures are common. They just have to set that up a certain way. Don't know if that's an option for us here. Anything else from the Public Works Committee? Hearing none, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seconded by Mr. Gurl, and we are adjourned, and see everybody in half an hour.
Thank you, everyone.
Aye, we didn't vote.
Thank you.
Don't
Aye.
go anywhere for economic development.
All right. Hello, all. How you guys doing?
Very good.
Hello?
Trying to stay safe, doing great.
All right.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, yeah.
All right, great.
Mr. Chris are we ready to go?
Mm-hmm.
All right. we'll go ahead and start the,
Mr. Billick, just so you know, before you start, John Phelps, I don't know if maybe you can see him too, but it looks like he is with us.
correct.
Okay, right.
I will mention him in the roll call. All right, I'd like to call the agenda Economic Development Committee meeting on Tuesday, April 14th, 2020. The time right now is 5:28. And let's go ahead and start with roll call. I'm actually going to call your name. Just let me know if you're here. I myself, Jas Billich, Dorothy Red,
Here?
Paul Arena,
Here.
John Butita,
Here.
Gene Crosby,
Here.
Dan Fellers, Bert Girl,
Here.
and Tim Neighbors is absent, and Fred Westcott. See that Fred is here. He might just not have his thing hooked up right now. We do have a quorum today. We'll move on to the approval of minutes for the March 3rd, 2020 Economic Development Committee.
So move.
A motion by Ms. Crosby and a second. Second by Mr. Girl. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. All right. Moving on to public comment, as I do see that we don't have any public commenters today. We'll skip past that and we'll move right along to the item of business, which is a resolution granting authority to the Winnebago County Board Chairman to execute the documents necessary to complete a loan for $250,000 from the host fees to Northern Illinois Community Development Corporation to establish the COVID-19 Emergency Fund Program. And I so move. Can I get a second?
Dorothy Red.
Second by Dorothy Red, Mr. Girl and Ms. Crosby. For discussion, I do see that we are joined today as well with John Phelps. I forgot to mention that John Phelps is here with us today, as well as Ms. Karolinkas from the State's Attorney's Office. But John, did you want to give a brief update on that? As we recently heard, there was a little bit of a stall with that. So if you wanted to give us an update on this program. See that John's still muted. Chris, did you want to give an update?
Oh, there he is.
I think John could probably address that more specifically. It looks like he might have just got unmuted, Mr. Chairman.
John, did you want to address that for us?
John, you there?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hello?
Yep.
Okay,
Yes.
sorry. So when President Trump signed the executive order for the SBA disaster relief loan, it was set up to a maximum of $2 million or 50% of your gross profit in the last tax year. So let's say you have a restaurant, $1 million of sales, your cost of goods about 30%, 700,000 gross profit, you would have been eligible for about $350,000. Well, we knew that having worked with SBA on a regular basis, that this money wasn't going to be available in a few days, probably 6-8 weeks later. And the businesses that were shut down, many of them just couldn't wait without any funds for that length of time. So we got together with, it was RADAC kind of initiated it at an executive committee meeting with some local banks. They approached us to manage this loan fund for them. We got together with the mayor, Chairman Haney, and a number of local banks, and we tried to put together about $2 million to create a bridge loan that would, based on what we thought these companies would receive from disaster relief funds, we would lend them up to $50,000 to buy them roughly 60 days until the emergency money came in, at which time they would repay us from those emergency funds they got from SBA. And we were underwriting it, being careful that there would be a nice cushion, that hopefully they'd get 200, pay us 50, up to 50, and they would keep the rest of the money to support their business. Well, about a week ago, so what also happened was as states were declared disaster areas, they were admitted into the system. Illinois, I think, was about the 29th state, so our companies are pretty far back in the queue for approval. Their loans are just starting to be processed now. Last week, a friend of mine from Georgia who does what I do down there received one of the award letters from one of his clients who thought she was going to get about $500,000. She was notified that she was going to get a maximum of $25,000, that the program was underfunded and oversubscribed. And so the new metric SBA came up with was 2 months of your operating costs not to exceed $15,000. And you could be eligible for this $10,000 grant up to $1,000 per employee for a maximum of $25,000. Well, that kind of put us in a bind because we'd made some commitments and closed a couple loans for $50,000, and the repayment source was designed to be from these disaster relief funds. So we immediately put a hold on the program, trying to confirm, first of all, that indeed was the new parameters, new guidelines, and then to adjust our program accordingly if that's indeed the case. The New York Times came out with an article last Thursday confirming this was the new policy of SBA, maximum of $25,000. So we immediately reinstituted the program, but we're not lending more than $25,000. And we're looking at the tax returns of the borrower to make sure, plus their employment, to make sure what we think they're reasonably eligible for. Because if you had operating costs of $10,000 a month on average and 2 employees, you would get the $15,000 maximum plus $2,000 of the grant for a total of $17,000. So we've been using those kind of measurements to guide our lending policy, but we are continuing to make loans. We're currently up to about $970,000 that we've already lent, using some of our own funds as a bridge to our bridge loan program. And we're still experiencing very strong demand. I think when a lot of small businesses discover that this PPP, payroll protection program, they may not be eligible, or they may not find a bank willing to work with them, I think there's going to be renewed interest in this disaster relief. We're also hopeful Congress will appropriate more funds so these awards can be larger. But at present, we still have a need for funds. The city has committed $250,000. The banks have committed $1.25 million. Loves Park is going Monday night for $225,000. We're asking the county to lend $250,000. We are working with DCO, who's proposed a $50,000 loan loss reserve that would cover all the public funds and the bank funds. We don't have confirmation of that yet. Hope to have that yet this week. And the way the program works is the banks are first to get paid, then the public money, then the loan loss reserve. We do expect to earn some money in this fund. We're charging the borrowers 6%. We're paying the banks 3%. As you know, the county, city, Loves Park would be paid 0%. So there is some interest income to be expected that will help cushion any losses. These are designed to be 60, 90-day loans to be paid out of disaster relief funds. So we're not really expecting any losses, but we do recognize that an error can be made in the amount of the award that they're going to get. And although we have short maturities, there's always a chance somebody would be so desperate for the money they wouldn't pay us, and we'd have to amortize these loans over some extended period, 2 to 3 years, to permit them to pay us back. And that's kind of it in a nutshell, unless you have any questions.
I am so sorry. I was muted. Mr. Arena, go ahead, and then I'll go to Mr. Chairman after that. I apologize. Go ahead, Mr.
Thank
Arena.
you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Phelps, so if there's a surplus at the end of this, what happens to that money?
Well, first of all, we're supposed to get paid a 1% management fee. At this point, I'm not sure there's any money in that. So at this point, we're working for free. But if there was some surplus money, I guess technically it would go to NICDC, who is the lender through these funds. I can assure you it will be very modest. With a 60-day loan at 6%, assuming we lend all $2 million, that would be $60,000. The 3% interest to the banks would be just under $30,000. So we wouldn't expect it to be much more than $30,000 over a 6-month period. There is a management fee due us that may or may not get paid. It's not going to be much of a moneymaker given the short duration and the interest spreads, but technically it would go to NICDC at this point.
Well, this is assuming that they get approved for the loan from the SBA, right?
Well, they still haven't approved any loans from SBA. They're getting what we're requiring is an application number, so we know they're in the system. But SBA right now, as of yesterday, is starting to contact local companies. They're telling them about their grant award, this $10,000, and they're saying, okay, based on your employment level, you're likely to get $2,000, $3,000, up to $10,000. And now you have to submit the balance of the information for the application. So these awards, the loan portion is probably still 30 days out from notification. And so we've been making these loans in anticipation. We believe that disaster relief is entitlement based on the new metric of 2 months of operating expenses up to $15,000. You're going to be awarded that as long as you're eligible. You're a small business, you meet their criteria, plus $1,000 per employee. And it's our opinion that that's entitlement money. As long as you meet those metrics, you're going to get it, but you've got to sign all the documents. You've got to get your tax returns in, personal history statements, personal financials, that kind of stuff that SBA is going to require. That was not required with the application. The application was a simple one-page document to expedite everything, and they're all still in their application process, everybody in Illinois.
My problem with this is that we're lending money at 0%, that we're the last ones to get paid and we absorb any losses from the program. It just seems like I just don't like the way it was structured. I would rather see if the county's going to be lending money at 0%, I'd rather see that savings be passed on to the borrower rather than the banks getting a profit off that money.
Well, if Paul, let's say there's $30,000 left over, we've already closed over 30 loans. So, would we prorate the $30,000 among, by the time this is over, 50, 60 loans?
Right, to give them, there's only going to be $30,000 in interest paid.
Well, so over a 6-month period. This is intended to wind down in about 6 months. So the 6-month interest on $2 million would be $60,000. After we pay the banks their interest, which will be just under $30,000, the net interest income should be about $30,000. And again, that's assuming we get no management fee at all for doing this. So there's not a lot of money in this program.
Unless it gets amortized out over a longer period of time.
If it gets amortized over a longer period of time, the plan would be to pay the banks off, assuming then the public sector just has some money, not all of theirs, because there aren't going to be a lot of these. Then I would propose we pay the public sector the 3% interest that we were paying the banks. And so you guys get some interest income on what's ever left over.
Mr. Chairman, you had your hand up.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Billick. Just had a question for John. What I know it's uncertain times, what would you say the chances are of DCEO given that 50 grand as kind of stop loss or money that would offset any losses? 50-50?
I was told by the program director, we had a conversation Easter Sunday. She got back to me early this morning and said she's proposed it to her boss He likes it. They've got to run it up the flagpole. She's program coordinator or something for this. It sounds like, they had proposed, they said we could probably get 100. I said we probably only need 50, and I'd really rather not ask for too much and not get this approved. I think there's a pretty strong likelihood. I haven't seen the agreements, though, and the devil's always in the details when you work with, the federal government or the state government. It can be pennies from hell by the time you manage all the compliance issues. But I think they're very interested. They're impressed that we've already got $1 million out while they're still trying to get their program organized, and they can get some good political benefit by backstopping our loan program.
Have you heard, just to follow up, Mr. Billick, John, have you heard any update from the SBA regarding what they said versus what they did? Or is there, what is the go forward on any of that?
Without any additional funding, I don't expect any changes in the program. I think what happened, according to the New York Times article, the first applications, they were awarding 500, 600, whatever people were eligible for. As the states started being added and the applications flooded in, they went dark for about 10 days. And all of a sudden they came back with a program, no explanation other than we're out of money and the maximum awards are $25,000. The only way they're going to budge off that is if Congress, part of the next stimulus bill, appropriates some money for this program. But candidly, nobody's talking about this program. They're all talking about payroll protection. And in my opinion, this disaster relief is a much better program for these very small businesses that maybe have a monthly payroll of $8,000 and are eligible for a $20,000 forgivable loan. Many of them were eligible for a couple $100,000 under disaster relief, and there just isn't adequate funding to get there. So at this point, it's all in Congress's hands.
Just one last thing, for the benefit of the whole group, the term PPP is thrown out. John, give a 30-second overview of the PPP, which is separate from this, but our board members, I've had board members ask questions because they're getting it from their constituents. Could you just give a quick synopsis on that? Thanks.
Yeah, so it's part of the CARES Act. It stands for Payroll Protection Program. And what it's designed to do, in my opinion, is for very large companies that have 400 employees to keep their employees on payroll rather than laying them off. So the company is eligible for 2.5 times its average payroll up to $10 million. This is not a program for a barber shop or a small little restaurant. And you have to use it. It's forgivable as long as 75% of that money is used for payroll. The other forgivable part is your rent or interest on your mortgage debt and your utility cost. As long as if you get a $5 million award, you use it 75% for payroll, the other 25% for utilities and rent, it's totally forgivable. The appeal of this, even for small companies that might be eligible for 20 grand, is it's free. And so everybody wants their free payment. The downside is once you pay your employees, you have to pay them over the next 8 weeks. So if you're a restaurant and you close on your PPP loan tomorrow, in 8 weeks you've got to spend all that 75% of that on payroll, or it's not forgivable. You may not be open in 8 weeks, or certainly only maybe 3 weeks. And so it just isn't designed for these kind of small businesses that are shut down for an extended period. They're not going to get the benefit they would get with disaster relief, but unfortunately has a lot more political support than disaster relief does.
I have heard the PPP grants or loans, those are already out, because I had a business owner in town call me and say he did get the money deposited in his account. So that is working for the FYI to the board.
Right, and it is a loan through the bank. It's a typical SBA, or similar to SBA 7A loan, and once the loan's approved, they have to fund in 10 days. So the borrower gets the money relatively quickly, whereas disaster relief could be 30, 60 days still. They haven't even finished their applications yet. SBA's got to draw up loan documents, got to get them to the borrower, get them signed, get them back, all of that. That money is going to be slow in coming. And that's why we hitched our wagon to disaster relief. We felt it was a better program for the small businesses. We knew they wouldn't get their money for 60 days or so.
Got it. Thank you.
Certainly.
Thank you, John. So John, just real quick question. So technically this program that we initiated and started is based off the SBA loans and their repayment on that. So that's how it originally started, or was this just a program where all the banks got together and all the municipalities got together to create their own program?
No, the way it started, I mean, everybody knew at the time the RAID Act meeting happened, which was now about 3 weeks ago. I mean, everybody knew these businesses were going to be shut down, and there was awareness that there was going to be some kind of stimulus. But we started raising the money, not exactly certain of what the rules of the program are going to be. In about 5 days after the RAID Act meeting, the president came out and announced this SBA disaster relief program, the funding for it. It didn't require Congress. It was an executive decision by him. And once we learned what the guidelines were, we put together this bridge loan program, confident that they would get certainly up to $50,000, depending on what their gross profit was, up to $2 million. These loans are very attractive because they're repaid to SBA at 3.75% over 30 years, so it's very manageable debt. And the idea was, let's just bridge them for the next 60 days because they're not going to get their money for 60 days. Many of them can't wait that long. So we designed a program where we're in and out, get our money back, pay back the lenders as quickly as we can, certainly within a year, probably 9 months. The disaster relief ends December 31, assuming they have enough money. At present, I'm surprised they haven't stopped taking applications because they've cut the award back from $2 million to $25,000. But it does end December 31. Our loans are 60 days, so we should be done with this by February 28th and pay out all the lenders by that period, except for the few loans that we may have to amortize for whatever reason. But those will be the exception. They'll be a relatively small amount of the overall funding.
Ms. Crosby.
I'd like to call the question, please, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I got a motion to call the question. Do I have a second? I don't see a second. Oh, I do. Yep, I got a second from John and Bert. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed? Any opposed? Mr. Arena, and we have. Looks like everyone was in favor except for Mr. Arena. It is called to question, so I'm looking for a vote to approve. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Mr. Arena's opposed. Anybody on the phones? Any chance? Nope. Okay. We have one opposed and the rest are in favor. Mr. Dornbush? And with that, we will move on to other matters. During other matters, I just wanted to discuss real quick, just to bring it up. I did email Mr. Dornbush. We'll be reaching out to the chairman here shortly. There was a lot of discussion amongst different board members. I'd like to open it up a bit more. And I'm inviting each committee member of mine to give me a call on in regards to host fees and any other programs or ideas. I am going to be forwarding over some more information to you as well in that regard. With the program that we have that we're now going to be, once we voted on the county board floor, if we approve that we will be a part of, that's a program for a lot of businesses, and there's been some delays in certain things and waiting on the SBA on the certain rules and everything like that put some strain on a lot of businesses that have actually already applied for these loans. some of our local businesses that are so small, it's very minimal that they get. And even from the PPP, it's not enough to carry them over. I've had some concern from a lot of our local business owners as well. With the host fee funds and the way that we've done it before to help support other businesses and to entice businesses moving to our area, I'd like to try to focus on seeing what we can come up with to actually benefit these local area businesses that are actually locally owned, been here for, X amount of years, and whatever other parameters that we decide to set forth, and try to see if we can actually partner with our municipalities in as far as doing some kind of a grant program, or maybe a semi-grant, semi-loan style program, something that would be run by ourselves in that regard, and try to help out even more. So please, again, I'm inviting you all to feel free to reach out to me so we can actually discuss that. Anybody else have any other matters? With that, I'm asking for a motion to adjourn. I got a motion by Mr. Girl, second by Ms. Crosby. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned.
We'll get going right at 6 o'clock, so we get about 5 minutes or so, guys. Thank you very much. Mr. Hoffman, I see we got you connected in. That's good.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just going to ask if you could see me.
And now I can't unsee you. I don't even know what that means. I don't even know what that means. I'm sorry. It's been a long day. Everybody's a little everybody's a little edgy. Sorry about that.
That's okay. That's quite all right, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the thought, though.
The State's Attorney Marilyn Height Ross. Good evening, everyone. I've been on the line, but I've been muted.
Hey, Marilyn.
Can you hear me, Chairman?
Is that the long lost Fred Westcott?
Oh, man.
Wow.
Yes, it is.
It's like
I thought
throwback
he was
night.
lost or something, man.
He's back. His IT works now.
Well,
Hello, Freddie.
how you doing, Joey?
I'm doing okay.
Are we having fun yet?
Visible.
What's nice about this is we can bring our own booze.
Excuse me, that's COVID anxiety medicine.
That sounds better, doesn't it?
Leave it to Mr. Kelly to come up with a good name.
Hello, Fred, you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Haven't heard from you for a while.
Well, I'm here now.
Attaboy.
Okay, good evening, everybody. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. I know we have a short agenda tonight. With that, I will ask the clerk to go ahead and call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Arena,
Here.
Mr. Village,
Here.
Mr. Booker, Mr. Booker, Mr. Butita,
Here.
Mrs. Crosby,
Here.
Mr. Fellers, Mr. Fellers, Mr. Fiducia, Mr. Fiducia, Mr. Girl,
Here.
Mrs. Gorel, Mrs. Gorel. I can see that she's on the line, but I'm not hearing her.
She is.
She is, thank you. Mr. Hoffman,
Present.
Mr. Kelly,
Here.
Mr. McDonald,
Here.
Mr. Neighbors, Mr. Neighbors, Mrs. Red,
Here.
Mr. Salgado, Mr. Salgado.
Present.
Oh, thank you. Mr. Schultz,
Here.
Mr. Tassoni,
Here.
Mr. Webster,
Here.
Mr. Westcott.
Here.
Thank you all. 4 absent, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much, Clerk Gumau, and thanks for everybody joining us tonight for an extra meeting just to address this one action item. We'll move through. There's no public comment that was signed up for this evening. Board member correspondence. Somebody had an item. Mr. Butita.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick thing. For the last 10 years, Frank Manzullo has addressed this board to announce the annual spring cleanup, which is sponsored by Keep Northern Illinois Beautiful. And if you all know, this community event was originally the brainchild of our county clerk, Lori Gumau. So Frank has asked me to announce that because of the current virus epidemic issue, that the spring cleanup has been rescheduled this year to June 20th. Last year, there were over 2,200 volunteers. So, and according to Frank, there's been a lot of interest, but anyone that is interested in participating in this year's cleanup can register on Keep Northern Illinois Beautiful's website, which is knib.org. And then just look under the program tab to register. Also, Frank asked me to encourage all residents who are looking for an activity during this time of shelter in place to consider using their daily walk to take a garbage bag with them and to pick up any litter that they can. And I know that I personally have done this myself and fill 4 garbage bags. So unfortunately, there's plenty of litter out there. So any and all that can help will help us make us a little more proud of our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Butita. Any other board members? I see Mr. McDonald has a hand up. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just think it would be maybe appropriate. I know it's unusual with our social distancing, but to take a moment of silence for Alderman John Beck.
Thank you. Very well said. We'll take a moment for Alderman Beck, who passed away over the weekend. Thank you very much, Mr. McDonald. Well said. Any other board member correspondence? Move on quickly to Chairman's report. So we threw one more thing at you this week, and I'm sorry that probably caught you off guard when the agendas came out. So we do have what we thought were 3 applicants for District 4. I believe there's been a slight change and we're down to 2 at this point. We're still sorting that out, but in an effort to include the board where they would get to see applicants in action, answering questions, having dialogue, and the public and the media, we're going to have an online interviews tomorrow night. I did ask Mr. McDonald and Mr. Hoffman to join me in the Zoom meeting to ask the candidates some questions. And then we're opening up to the entire board. If you have questions or thoughts, shoot them to your respective caucus chair. Maybe that's already occurred. But if you have any thoughts, send them to Joe and Keith. They're going to aggregate that, get that to me tomorrow morning, and then we'll try to get as prepared as possible for the interviews. You are very welcome to watch the Zoom meeting streamed live on the website tomorrow evening. That is not the conclusion of the process. That is just a part of it. If you have other thoughts, want to talk to the candidates, stakeholders are weighing in, whatever that needs to be, that needs to be. But feel free to reach out to in any follow-up situation. The soonest that we could have a recommendation before the board would be not this Thursday, next Thursday. If we don't, and we're not ready to go with a recommendation and an appointment that would be subject to board approval, then we would have to do it at the next board meeting, just because we by state law are asked to fill vacancies within a couple of month period. I did see a hand up on that, Mr. Arena.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wasn't on the board at the time, but it was my understanding that when the selection of a new state's attorney had to be made, that the Democrats did the interviewing and the Republicans weren't involved. And I'm curious why this one is on a bipartisan basis when it's a partisan selection.
Well, there is all kinds of room for partisanship. This is just what I've done since I become chairman. When we had a county clerk, a state's attorney, and now a board member, is we have an open interview process where the community, the media, and all board members who might not otherwise be engaged couldn't be part of, or at least observing them in public. There's all kinds of time for the caucuses to caucus, to meet, to engage candidates in a less, I guess, in a different manner, call individually. Any traditions of yesteryear are still able to be worked in. The only thing we've added in this process is that we do attempt to have at least one time where we set aside open posted meeting where people can tune in, whether that be in person normally or in this case, a Zoom situation.
But my question is, in the past, you had, if it was a Democrat selection, you had Democrats doing the interview. In this case, it's a Republican selection, but you have Mr. Hoffman and Mr. McDonald doing the interview, which seems to be different than what had happened before. Am I misunderstanding? Is it different than what occurred in the state's attorney selection?
Everything's different than in the state's attorney because of the multitude of candidates where we had interviews throughout the day, and we had a smattering of our board who attended the meetings. Typically I ask most of the questions. I'm asking for feedback through the caucuses ahead of time just to be more inclusive of the board, including the Republican caucus. But at the same time, yeah, I invited the Democrat caucus chair to add questions because this is the first time we filled a county board seat, at least in my time around. And if there's questions that make sense to be asked, I think would be to the benefit of everybody. At the end of the day, it's really simple. There already is phone calls. There's people weighing in with letters of support. There's people with very strong opinions for and against various candidates. The feedback is already flowing. I'm sure that will increase. I'm sure our central committee of the Republican Party will have thoughts, other Republicans, other stakeholders, other elected officials. At the end of the day, we'll take all that. I am looking for feedback from anybody that wants to give it to me. including the Republican caucus. At the end of the day, a recommendation comes forward by me onto the board agenda to the board. Then it's the boards from there. They can vote it up or down. But I am looking for feedback and just want to be as inclusive as possible. Any other follow-ups on that?
Yes.
It's close, it's in the ballpark, but at the same time, I do know we had multiple people attending. We had Republicans attending the interviews of state's attorney candidates. I remember specifically Mr. Booker attended the state's attorney interviews, or a majority of them, as a Republican. But at the end of the day, what we have found is that we do need to double check voting records and share voting record history, so that primary voting that you pulled the Democrat ballot is something that we're looking at there. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just really quickly, I did speak with Joe Hoffman on the Democratic side over the weekend. He indicated that he and his caucus would be willing to observe our history, our tradition, in which that whatever name the Republican caucus comes up with, the Democrats will support. Correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, but I think you had said this was our process, and you look forward to supporting whichever candidate we bring forward. And the second thing I want to bring up as well, I am working with the Central Committee, just so the Republican caucus members. I haven't been able to speak to all of you yet, but I am working with the Central Committee as well, as far as identifying a viable candidate.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman.
Hello? Hello?
Oh, Mr. Hoffman, go ahead.
Thank you.
No, this is.
Oh, Mr. Webster, you're next. I got Mr. Hoffman, then Mr. Webster.
Okay, I just want to confirm what Keith said, that I did have that discussion with Keith and with the chairman, and I don't see necessarily a problem here, because I think when we interviewed the state's attorney, certainly the chairman was there as a Republican and asked questions, but when it came down to the vote, there was some controversy a little bit, but I assured Mr. McDonald that, and I hope my caucus will live up to it. I think they will. They've always been very historical about this, that we will support the Republicans in their choice. It is their choice, and we will not try to interfere with their choice. But we may have some questions just to get to know the people. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman. Mr. Webster.
Thank you. And thank you, Joe, for the position of yourself personally and your Democrat caucus. I have talked to a couple of Democrats as well, and that I affirm what you say. That is their position as well. There are a couple of things I do want to mention. There is a difference this time around in the respect that when it came to the state's attorney, that's a county-wide position. This one is a position that is a district position that we're replacing a person on. And as far as historically, it goes through the Republican Central Committee and the precinct committeemen in that, within that district, they have a weighted vote who they support. And so then it goes to the Central Republican Committee and then through our caucus. That's the process that we've been following. It is a process. And so when we do this now, I don't know the way, obviously we're in some crazy times right now, but the fact there that we're opening this up there for everyone countywide to weigh in on this with their decisions and so forth. This is a decision made by the people from that district from which the person vacated, and then through the Central Republican Committee and the caucus. That is the process that we followed for years. And so I would hope that we would continue that that tradition, that process.
Sure. I'll let legal weigh in, because I'm pretty sure that what you're describing is very possible in this process. The only thing we're adding is an open interview where people in the district because I would imagine that, you know, there might be a few people in District 4 that may want to tune in tomorrow night to listen to questions being asked to people that want to represent them. I also think it has board implications. I think it has implications to all constituents that use county services and elected officials. I'm getting letters of support, and I've shared them with you, from mayors that share district boundaries. I think it all matters. Adding in a public meeting just ensures that somebody that's going to represent their district potentially in the way you all have been elected to represent your district, that the community gets the opportunity, the media gets the opportunity, and all board members get the opportunity to put their eyeballs on somebody and hear them talk a little bit about what they're up to, what their goals are, why they're running before a recommendation goes. So there is all kinds of room for if a central committee wants to talk to the board, to Mr. McDonald as the caucus chair, that's not carved out. But at the same time, we've been communicating about this opening for 32 days now. And there's been multiple communications shared with the central committee, with the board. The invitation for people to apply now has taken place. I think it's a walk and chew gum opportunity. Regardless of how this plays out, a recommendation will come to the board. Nobody gets appointed the District 4 rep unless the board majority approves of it. And that is at the end of the day, regardless of tradition, no disrespect to tradition, the chairman puts a recommendation on an agenda and then the board can vote it up or down. But at the end of the day, I think there's every opportunity for all of those inputs to happen that reflect both tradition and also the idea that we won't be making selection in a closed session situation or in a closed meeting situation. It'll be open to the public.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Marilyn, go ahead.
This is Angie.
Oh, you sounded like Marilyn. Angie, go ahead. Mrs. Goro, go ahead.
Tradition is one thing, but protocol is another thing. This is a Republican situation right now. I do not have the right to vote, and I don't want the right to vote for a Republican to replace a Republican on our board. That is the job of the Republicans on our board to do that, and their central committee. What they do, though, is they're the ones who are the Republicans are the ones who are going to make this decision. And then they're going to pass that on to you, like we did with Maryland. And they will have their choice. And then it's up to you to pass their choice to the whole board for us to vote on. That's how I got on the board. I believe that's how several other of us got on the board that replaced a board member. It's protocol, nothing about tradition. It's the way it should be done, step by step. Yes, I would like to hear what they're saying, but for me to voice my opinion on it, no, because that is going to be the decision of the Republicans on our county board. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs.
Well said.
This is Dorothy Red. Can I say something, please?
Hi, I have Mr. Arena first, and then I have Mrs. Red. Mr. Arena.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Who withdrew? Which candidate withdrew?
I have to confirm it, but there's a possibility that one of the candidates withdrew, and I'll communicate that as soon as I can I can in fact get a confirmation on it.
Okay, thank you.
I'll get that out even tonight if I'm able to confirm that.
I believe it was Mr. Olson.
Mrs. Red.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I agree with Angie. This is a Republican being replaced by a Republican. And I don't want any say-so in that. And I don't think any of the Democrats should have a say in it. That's their person, and they're replacing that person. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yes, Chairman Dave Tassoni here.
Hi, Mr. Tassoni, go ahead.
Yeah, and I know I've made this speech a few other times in the past, and I would concur with Mr. Hoffman, Mrs. Goro, and Mrs. Red. In my opinion, I will not vote to confirm anyone other than who was recommended by the Republican caucus of the board. And that's the way it should be. And I just hope that the person that you bring forward for recommendation is the person that they want. Otherwise, it probably won't pass, just like in other cases.
Yep.
So like I say, I'm a hardcore Democrat and can't get over the way things have been in this case. And the way they have been is the way it will be, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stoney. The only thing I would point out, respectfully, of course, is that we haven't had an interview yet. I actually believe most of the time we do get to consensus on a great number of things. What I will say is what we ran into last time was that we had the Democrat caucus went one direction and the Democrat Central Committee as a whole did not go in that particular direction. So I understand that that can happen as well, because it did. And sometimes people of goodwill do disagree. At the end of the day, nobody gets appointed as the District 4 rep unless the majority of the county board votes in favor of that. And I believe that we'll get where we need to be on it. I do. Mr. McDonald on a follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hearing this great conversation, it got me thinking, I know you had received 3 applications. Have you vetted their political affiliations prior to tomorrow's interviews?
I do need to reach out. It's a little bit of a weird scenario with some things being shut down, but I do need to reach out to the clerk regarding pulling voting histories. But you guys have the written information that I have that's been shared and disseminated. And we also have it set up where if anybody wants to share their thoughts with additional information, they can submit it through the board office email. That will be pushed out to the board as well as they go through their individual and collective process of determining who you want to have on the board. So if I get something in writing that's discernible or from a constituent or the voting history, that'll be shared with the board. I have received phone calls from people with opinions. I'm sure some of you have as well. Some of you have already shared some of those. If there's anything definitive that I get that is documented, I have had a history of passing that along, and will pass it along in this case as well. Mr. Hoffman on a follow-up.
Yeah, I just want to add, I don't think there's anything wrong with I think what you're trying to accomplish, Mr. Chairman, is us get to know the person and talk to them and just ask questions. I think that's fine for all of us. But again, I'm going to go back to it. At the end of the day, it's going to be between Mr. McDonald and yourself to make this decision, because you could overrule, I suppose, if you wanted to. I don't think you would do that. I think you would follow what Mr. McDonald brings forth from his committee. And we, the Democrats, as I can hear my comrades and say, we will certainly step back and let Republicans have. So, thank you.
Yep, and I've had multiple conversations with Mr. McDonald. I'm confident that we'll figure it out. Any other questions? Okay, good. We'll move on. Our next item of business is the Standing Committee's Economic Development, Mr. Billick. Mr. Billick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, there he is.
Yep, thank you. Tonight, we only have the one resolution, and that is the resolution granting authority to the Winnebago County Board Chairman to execute the documents necessary to complete a loan for $250,000 from the host fees to Northern Illinois Community Development Corporation to establish the COVID-19 Emergency Fund Program. And I so move.
We have a motion by Mr. Billick on the NICDC host fee partnership of $250,000. May I have a second, please? Mr. Kelly, Mr. Hoffman, thank you very much. Item is now before the board for discussion. Any discussion by board members?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Hi,
this is
Mrs. Gorel, go ahead.
The one thing, when John Faust was talking, the one thing I didn't hear was, I'm assuming the city of Rockford is also chiming in on this? Will they be putting up money?
Oh, okay. So, yeah, go ahead if you want to take that, Mr. Billick, but the answer is yes. And I believe Loves Park has committed through their council as well. Anything you want to add, Mr. Billick?
Yes, the city is on board. We're actually matching their funds right now. They're going to be investing $250,000, and then the city of Loves Park is also on board. They've given confirmation that they will be on board. I do believe that they still have to make the final vote on Monday, and they're going to be committed for $225,000 for this program as well. And I probably should have given a brief description. So as far as this program goes, it's a partnership between the banks, which is going to be and local municipal partners, and including the county. And we pulled together the money just like we have previously with the NICDC and running it through the RLDC. And the RLDC, through John Phelps, he's going to be approving these loans. And these loans are basically gap loans that are going to be for the length of about 6 months. And that is actually to have the businesses get approved sooner through RLDC while they're waiting for the SBA loans to come through. Currently right now, from our understanding, from what John gave us a description on, for anyone that wasn't there, basically right now the SBA is taking extra time because they're used to having maybe, a few hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of loans coming through in a year. Now, right now they've had a lot of people apply for it, and there's still, I believe we were the 29th state, as he mentioned, that came on board with this. And so for that, we actually have our companies in Illinois are waiting a little bit longer than the other ones that have already applied, and even they're still waiting because they're still going through the application process. So this is going to be basically like a bridge loan for that. And then I believe that kind of sums it up for the most part. This is a partnership with our local community, so to bridge that gap.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Gorel. I see a hand up, Mr. Arena.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure if Mr. Phelps is still on the call, but I was unable to ask.
I am.
I had a question I wanted to ask in committee. This money, is there restrictions on what they can use the money for?
Under the SBA rules, they're not supposed to use it for debt repayment or CapEx. It's supposed to be used for operating expenses to buy them time until the economy's back up on its feet, open for business, and they're back on their feet. We're planning to only be in for 60 days. So as soon as they get their award from the SBA, they're supposed to come in and pay us. And their note matures July 1 of 2020. What they do beyond that with their SBA money is, not my concern, but they're going to use our money to pay some bills till they get their SBA disaster relief funds.
So would that include paying employees to keep employees on the payroll?
Yeah, absolutely. They need to be a little careful though if they're applying for that PPP program we talked about. If you apply for both payroll protection program, which has to be used for payroll primarily, and you apply for disaster relief and you use disaster relief for payroll, then you have to repay or essentially refinance that disaster relief with your PPP loan. So they have to be careful of how they do that. So, but otherwise, yeah, we're not restricting that. We caution them that they may lose some of that debt forgiveness if they use disaster relief for payroll.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, Mr. Arena? Seeing none, Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Another question from Mr. Phelps. Is it written into the contract that once they receive their SBA funds that this loan will be paid back first? Is there what's to compel?
What we have is we've given them till all the notes mature July 1. So we're giving them roughly 60, today it's probably 75 days or so till the note matures. At that point, if they haven't paid us, we have the option of changing the terms of the agreement. We're charging 6% now. If I find out somebody got their SBA money and didn't pay us, and we have to amortize this loan, it's not going to be at 6%. It's going to be at a higher rate because they haven't lived up to the terms of the agreement. It's stated in the commitment letter, this is what the funds are for and how they're to be repaid. But short of sending them into default and foreclosing on them or seeking a judgment, we don't really have that string where we say you have to. It's just their note comes due in 75 days and their only repayment source is the SBA funds.
Any follow-ups, Mr. McDonald, any follow-ups to that? Did I hear Mrs. Gorel?
Yes, you did.
All
Now
right.
I'm puzzled right now.
Okay.
Because if they don't the SBA funds to pay us back and they default on us, then where do we stand for our getting our money back?
If they default, we're going to have to press a judgment against them. We will seek legal recourse to get paid.
In that case, though, they could be going bankrupt, and where will that leave us? That's not in their contract.
Yeah, Angie, I can't. I mean, I can put in the loan documents you're compelled to do it, but if they don't do it, our only recourse is legal action.
But
SBA is not going to cut the check to Northern Illinois Community Development Corporation.
Understand that part. They're on their honor that they're going to be paying us back.
Absolutely.
And that's why I'm saying is that contract they're signing, it's just like when you take out a mortgage. If you don't pay this back in a timely fashion, then you go into foreclosure or we put a judgment on you, and that should be in that contract.
That's in there. That's a default provision in the loan agreement.
All right,
if you don't pay us by July 1, you're in default. We have a default interest. I'm sorry, what?
I'm telling you that if you go into default, what's going to happen?
We get an attorney and we take them to court and we get a judgment against them. That's standard practice.
Thank you, John.
Yes.
You always do right.
Hello?
Yes. Mr. Webster, go ahead.
Yeah. Along that line, I guess what I'm thinking is there some sort of collateral that they have to put up for this loan?
Yeah, we're taking, and generally on most of these, because many of them are just tenants, we're taking general filings against their business assets. In a couple of cases, we have taken mortgages on the real estate. But you have to recognize for many of these, they have senior debt in front of us. So, or other ones have very limited assets. We have personal guarantees and we have liens on their business assets to secure the loans.
I ask you this because several years ago, the county made a loan, and believe it or not, I was opposed to that one as well because what they put up for this loan, it wound up being a loan there, but there was already two other banks involved. So we were third in line for payment. And so when the guy did wind up going bankrupt on the deal there, us being third in line after the first two lenders got paid off, we were on the hook for $125,000 or $150,000. I don't recall what it was, but we wound up having to settle for $29,000, I think it was, because that's all that was left. And so taxpayers lost a bunch of money.
And Mr. Webster, that's fairly typical when you're a subordinate lender. But many of these businesses are going to have other loans that are secured with bank loans. That we understand that. We will have their personal guarantees. So if they don't pay us and if we don't get paid out of liquid assets, they run the risk of personal bankruptcy. And we prosecute. We don't just walk away from loans. We expect to be repaid by SBA disaster relief funds, and if they don't do that, we're not going to be very forgiving to them because they didn't honor their word.
I'm just looking out for the taxpayer's dollar.
And I understand. And the way the loss works is it would be pro rata among the city, the county, and Loves Park. So if there were, let's say there were $100,000 of losses out of the $2 million we lend, it would be, Loves Park is 225, so it's not quite 1/3 each, but it's very close to 1/3 each. After the interest income that's earned for the program, that's the first source. And if you weren't here earlier, we are working with the Department of Commerce for a $50,000 loan loss reserve. I'm hoping to have final say on that yet this week. I've been assured it's been recommended, but we don't have the paperwork yet.
Yes, thank you, John. And I was here. I heard the whole dialogue there at the committee meeting there, and the one thing that struck out at me there was some of the some of the things you're weighing your decisions on are what you read in the New York Times. And I'm sorry, but I can't.
I've actually seen an award letter, so I know with confidence that SBA has changed the rules. It's no longer up to $2 million. It's up to $25,000, not to exceed 2 times your monthly operating expenses plus $1,000 per employee. And that's how we're underwriting our loans. If you've got 2 employees and you have 2 months of operating expenses of at least $15,000, we will not lend more than $17,000.
Okay, thank you.
And if we don't think $17,000 is going to get them 60 days, we're not going to lend money to them.
Okay.
We're not going to just give somebody money because they'll take anything. We have to make sure that there's reasonable likelihood they'll survive until SBA funds their loan.
Well, thank you, John. I did listen to all of that with particular interest. I'm interested in everything that you do at the county, but when it comes down to the money, the taxpayers' money that we're spending, that really jumps out at me. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Mr. Webster. I think I saw one more hand up. Mr. Arena, I'll go back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just, Mr. Phelps, so I understand the repayment. These loans are given until July. At that time, everyone who received their SBA loan, that money will be taken and distributed to all the banks, right?
Well, actually, Paul, the disaster relief actually runs till December 31, unless they run out of money and they stop the program. And when we were underwriting these loans, we were basically triaging who has their application in first and has the greatest need and is likely to see their money early. If they repay us, we would like the opportunity to relend it to somebody who may have applied later. We think there's businesses out there that think, I'm good for 60 days and I'll wait till I get my SBA money. And all of a sudden they're not going to get it, or they're not going to get their PPP funds that they're relying on. And they're going to call us. We had a lull of about 4 days, and all of a sudden they're starting to come in again today. There's people out there that are panicking because the bank's telling them, you're not going to get your PPP loan. They're not hearing from SBA, and now they're panic stricken and they need some cash. So I do think that may continue yet, but ideally, yeah, we'd like to wrap this up in July if we could, for sure.
Right. But then the banks, so if it goes to the end of the year, the banks will get repaid in early 2021, and we will get paid sometime before the end of 2021, unless some of the loans are amortized out for a longer period of time. Is that right?
My goal is you're paid out by the end of February of 2021. There may be a couple of loans that get amortized, and depending on those, it may be simpler for us to transfer them into our other NICDC loan program rather than stick it on you guys for this. At this point, it's a little bit uncertain, but I don't need to manage another loan program with 3 loans in it. So we want to make this efficient as well as fair to all the investors.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Arena. Mr. Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a follow-up question, Mr. Phelps. My guess is that the attorney's fees that we would incur in pursuing any of these to establish a judgment that the attorney's fees would be added to the judgment, but could you clarify?
Yes.
that?
Yes, our loan documents are very specific. The borrower is responsible for paying any costs of collection, plus accrued interest, plus default interest, plus late fees, plus principal and interest. So we can come at them with two guns loaded. You know, oftentimes you find when they're that destitute, you're not going to get it. And that's a judgment call. And we're happy to come back to the county and the city and Loves Park and say, here's the situation. If the person files bankruptcy and the company's bankrupt, there's no point in hiring an attorney. But in those cases where there's outstanding debt and we think we can collect, we will have an attorney prosecute in court and get a judgment against them. And those judgments can garnish wages, can apply to assets and personal assets, and are enforceable.
And just as a follow-up.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a follow-up, I guess to Mrs. Gorel's earlier point, where she raised the question, what's going to happen if they default? Your answer was that, we'll pursue aggressively with legal support a deficiency judgment. But the reality is, based on what you just said, you're going to do an assessment. Is this even worth pursuing? Is it worth incurring additional attorney's fees? And, I think that dialogue just illustrates the level of risk that the county is bearing, and I'm not in favor of that.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Any other questions by board members? I see Mr. Salgado has his hands up. Go ahead, Mr. Salgado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I got two questions and then a comment. The first question that I have is, Mr. Phelps, I know you mentioned something about that you guys already have given $900,000, $1 million, I believe, so far. The question that I have is, where are those funds being allocated from? And then the second question to that is, I know that it was rumored or potentially came out with 2 million as your goal to essentially collect these funds to issue this bridge loan to the companies. Is that correct? And I just want
Yes, that's correct. Yes. Okay. So, the private banks have committed, and private banks and Neil Puri collectively have put in 1.25 million. There's 725,000 that we're seeking from City of Rockford, Loves Park, and the county. So we're just under $2 million. The million that we've lent so far, we have used surplus funds from our existing NICDC loan fund. The board and the banks authorized we could go ahead and do that. The bank, we just closed on the bank funding on Friday. So those funds have been repaid to the other NICDC fund from this new fund. And right now we do have some excess funding from the bank funds to make some additional loans. The only funds we don't have are the public funds yet. And so, but we do have some surplus funds under the NICDC existing loan fund to continue to make loans up to that $2 million.
Yeah, and as a follow-up, Mr. Phelps, the current selection process is first come, first serve. Is that how my understanding from
yes.
the SBA?
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you. So just to follow up, my concern here, and I've expressed it, I know Ms. Crosby and Mr. McDonald kind of acknowledged last time when we were trying to give $100,000 per, for obviously the equipment for medical. There's obviously a lot of uncertainty right now. I've seen the hotel occupancy, the revenue coming in, the streamlines on that aspect of it. Those are huge concerns for me. 250,000 is a huge amount right now. And so I have to look long-term from my perspective, from the finance piece of it. And so with that uncertainty, I'm just not comfortable to give out with a high risk that currently we have. It depends on the ripple effect currently that's in there already been established, what that's going to be, what the losses are going to be potentially, and how quickly we're going to recover from this. And so those are uncertainties for me. I cannot just make a decision and just allocate 250,000. That's from my perspective, from the risk management piece of it. Obviously, from the revenues coming in potentially that are going to be impacted both from the state, local, and obviously from our sales taxes. Those are huge concerns to me. And so from that aspect of it, you know, I'm hesitant to move forward on this. This is just my opinion. Has nothing to do with, I'm not in support of small business. I'm in support of small business whatsoever, and trying to help our region, you know, with the downtown and different initiatives that we currently have, with bringing new business with Costco, you know, with different burger foods and all that stuff. You know, that's going to create jobs and generate revenue, return on our investment. So that's where I make my decision. So I just want to be clear on that. And I honestly don't know if Mr. Chapman has, you know, any information on revenues that what he's seen. If he could maybe elaborate. I know that we're going to have a finance committee meeting on Thursday to talk about this, where we're standing, but I just wanted to see if Mr. Chapman had any information on the revenue piece, if he's looked into it. So I defer my time to Mr. Chapman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Salgado. Steve, you there? There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, we're in the process right now of going through the major revenue sources and pretty much looking at what we've taken in through probably February, and then trying to project out through the end of the year. I know there's certain issues with our sales taxes, our public safety sales tax, things such as that, but we're just trying to make some assumptions that that make sense. Again, we don't know how long this is going to go on, what the impact of the unemployment is, et cetera, et cetera. So we hope to have you know, some understandable numbers on Thursday at the finance meeting.
Mr. Chairman, John Phillips, may I just want to, the primary repayment source for these loans is not the business revenues. I certainly understand, we're highly cognizant of the distress these businesses are facing. The primary repayment source is the SBA disaster money that will be forthcoming in the next 60 days. Now, I grant you there may be a dishonest character out there who is insistent on not paying us, and we will prosecute. But by and large, these are our fellow citizens who are good people trying to keep their business alive, who have applied for SBA disaster relief money, and it will arrive, and they will repay us.
Thank you, John. Any other follows? I see Mr. Billick has his hand up. Mr. Billick, then I'll go back to Mrs. Gorel, you're second. Mr. Billick? Yep.
And John, in regards to how this loan is actually what you just mentioned, which this one, the primary payback is from the SBA and people that applied for the SBA loan. So it's basically dependent on the fact that they already applied for the SBA loan and have likelihood of actually getting approved and getting that money. Whereas the current ones, the current loan program that we also have that is still available for small businesses isn't covered by any other lender. It's actually in regards to where it's coming from, it's actually just from the business that has to repay, correct?
That's correct, yes.
So this one is going to be this one is actually going to be dependent on the fact that there's going to be another federal partner that's actually going to be repaying, or where the money is actually going to be coming from initially.
That's correct. And as part of our underwriting, they have to provide evidence of their loan application number on the SBA letterhead. They have to provide financial information and their credit score, because the way SBA, from what we've been told by SBA, is they don't have the time to underwrite all these loans, particularly under $500,000. So they're going to make sure you get all the paperwork in, your tax returns, personal financial statement, that kind of stuff. Check the boxes, and then they're going to pull a credit bureau on the owners. And as long as you're above a minimum score, we think it's around 650, they will approve you. It's entitlement. They're not underwriting these. They don't have the time. Unfortunately, whereas they advertise it up to $2 million, it's now capped at $25,000 because they don't have the funds. So we've had to ratchet back our approvals. We're not going to go above what we think they're going to get from SBA, because we want to be paid in full when they get their SBA check.
Correct. And just a follow-up in that respect, the other loan that we currently still have, that's also got an interest rate of 8%. I believe that we still have to give final approval on that. But this one, when all these businesses come forward to you, since this is actually a partnership through you guys, we don't have to go and approve each an individual loan. They're going to be we're basically granting you that you guys will be approving it. You guys are going to be in charge of this program, correct?
Well, there's, and I don't want to confuse the issues. So there's two different programs that you're involved in. You were involved in our recapitalization of NICDC a year ago, where $1 million was pledged to residential rehabs, and those loans you're being paid 1%. We, in fact, have done 18 homes in the last year under that program, and those loans you don't actually approve individually; they're approved by the NICDC board. In addition to that, we manage your revolving loan fund where you approve all of those loans. The interest rate's set by the board. We make a recommendation. You approve those. So I don't want to confuse the two issues if for the board. If I can clarify if that's not clear.
Anything else, Mr. Billick?
Actually, I was going to say, I know Keith had a question.
Yeah, I got him. Yeah, do you have any other questions or are you good?
I'm good for right now.
Okay, thank you. Mr. McDonald and then Mr. Arena. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I have Mrs. Gorel first, then Mr. McDonald. Mrs. Gorel, you're up.
Thank you, Chairman. Do you know, Mr. Phelps, you have done us a lot of good work. That's one reason we entrusted to you our economic development part when it came to the revolving loans, to make sure that our citizens were able to get loans that banks wouldn't have them. You've always done good by us, and I can't see now why you would not do good by your word. I see that we have a lot of young people who have invested their lives in their small businesses. Small business is how big businesses get there. Without the small business person, we have nothing. We have no future. And I will be going with you, John, because of the fact I trust that you're going to be doing right by this. You know your business. I don't know your business. You do. And I also know that the citizens of Winnebago County need support at this time to keep their businesses going. Yeah, they might not have the virus, but that virus has just ruined everyone's businesses. And if we as citizens can't help them, and county board members can't give them a stake in their future, then where are we? What are we doing if we can't support these young businesses? Let's keep them going. Let's keep those new businesses going, those small businesses. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Gorel. Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Angie did a great job sharing some of what I wanted to say. If this was a give, I've been vocal, a give would absolutely be no way, no starter, a hard no. The fact that it's a loan, I understand that we are assuming some risk. We're not getting any of the interest, but our small businesses are important. They're in two ways. They're providing jobs, and those jobs in our local area help people go out and spend their money on other things, which keeps our sales tax up. And that's the other reason, of course, to keep the small businesses going is to help protect our sales tax revenue. That's why I think it is important we try to help all the small businesses that we can survive this unique time, and hopefully they get to open very, very, very soon.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, Mr. McDonald. Mr. Arena, I'll go back to you. Then I see Mr. Kelly. Mr. Arena.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Phelps, so do we have a way of knowing when the SBA loan is funded? Like are we able to know when we should expect the...
I mean, we're going to have to rely on the goodwill of our borrowers. We won't be notified. SBA is not going to notify us of the loan, but we will be checking with them. We know we're going to know roughly when people are getting their letters. I mean, people are already sending the initial letter to us, trying to help them interpret what it means. And if we're starting to see people get award letters and closing on their loans and others aren't contacting us, we're going to follow up. But again, these loans mature July 1. So there's not a lot of time of wiggle room for people to get a loan or get their money from SBA and not notify us. We're going to be on top of it. And come July 1, there's a day of reckoning. If you haven't paid us, you better have a good reason why you haven't paid us, because you should have got your SBA money by then.
Right, but so these loans could be the entire amount of the SBA loan, is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, it could be. And that all we're doing, I mean, you know, that's all they're eligible for from SBA. We're just front loading it, and then they're going to pay us when they get it. So we have to make sure that's going to get them for a long enough period till hopefully they're open for business and can start generating cash flow organically, as opposed to through some kind of stimulus money.
Right, but my concern is that if come July 1, things haven't stabilized and they're out of money again and they get the SBA money, they're going to act in like self-preservation and just keep using that money to prop up their business and not repay us and just deal with the consequences later. You know what I mean?
That is a risk. I'm not going to deny that, Paul. That is a risk that and what we will do at that point is we will sit down with them. We will do a modification of the agreement. We're not going to charge them 6% anymore. It's going to be a higher rate because of the risk, and we'll have to amortize it over some reasonable time period that they can support. And our goal will certainly be to keep them in business. We don't get paid by liquidating businesses.
Right.
We want to keep them in business, but at the same time, they didn't honor their agreement. So, you know, there will be, you know, some penalty for that in terms of your interest rate's going to go up, and we're going to have to hold this for a while.
Yeah, I do think that this is an important thing to try to do, but, you know, I'm uncomfortable with the fact that there's not shared risk from all the contributing parties. And I'm concerned about our financial situation and that we're making this decision before we've evaluated our financial situation. So I don't think I can support this today, but I maybe we could revisit it if it doesn't pass, but there's too many questions. So I'm sorry, but that's my, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Dave Tassoni.
Mr. Tassoni, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I got at least a question or two and then a comment. If I could, John and Mr. Phelps, in all seriousness, is this a venture or at least a investment that you would feel comfortable making with your own personal money?
I'm not. I don't have $2 million to do this.
Well, it's not a question about how much money. It's just, would you venture to take this risk with your own personal finances?
No, honestly, I wouldn't. I'm not in that kind of position.
And with that, I mean, one of my concerns is it's inevitable that I struggle back and forth with the small businesses and large businesses in the county, and I struggle with wondering what's going to happen with the county employees. And who knows what's to come when we get our financial report based on our revenues. I think it's going to be really bad. And I just think that the county needs to invest a large majority of what it has into its employees. And I think by taking away anything and giving it to anybody else other than its employees under these times is the wrong thing to do. So, and at this time, I can't support this matter. I think there's going to be a lot of people that fall off the wagon. There's going to be a lot of hardship, and I'm pretty sure the worst is yet to come. But if I had to decide today, the employees of the county come first. Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Salgado. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Salgado, hold on one second. I got Mr. Kelly and then Mr. Salgado. My apologies.
No
Sorry
problem.
about that.
Thank you, Chairman. This loan is a limited lifeline to a limited number of businesses that might otherwise fail without it. I've heard some in the past refer to the host fee as a rainy day fund. Welcome to the rainy day.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Mr. Salgado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Phelps, quick question for you. So is the SBA give them an award letter saying that they are approved for that PPP loan, or how is, or I'm sorry, not the PPP, but that loan that obviously that bridge loan that we're giving them, are they, is the SBA saying here's the award letter that they qualify and they're going to get the the funds to essentially do what they need to do for the
what SBA is saying is that by applying, you can get up to a $10,000 grant based on your number of employees, $1,000 per employee. So that as soon as they contact you and you acknowledge that, supposedly in a few days, you will get that check. The balance of the loan that you're eligible for, up to $15,000 today, is reliant on them providing the rest of their information, completing their application. They have to get their information, and SBA is not going to make a loan if they don't have your tax returns, if they don't have your personal statement, that kind of stuff. That was not in the original application, the one page that you submit online. Once you do that, this is entitlement. As long as you qualify, you're not Woodward governor, or you're not a convicted felon, or they've really relaxed these rules. You can even have a prior loss to the government and be eligible, which normally under SBA loans is not permitted. It is entitlement up to that $15,000. And we're underwriting them to make sure they're going to qualify for that $15,000. So I have no reason to believe they're not going to, unless the borrower just simply says, "Oh, I don't want it anymore." That could be a risk, but I don't know why they would do that facing a default with us. They're going to want to get their money, and it's payable over 30 years at 3.75%. They don't want to pay us 8% over 2 years. They're highly motivated to do these and get the work done and completed.
Sure. Thank you. That answers my question.
Sure.
Hello? Hello?
Yeah, Mr. Webster, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. It's probably my last time. What Mr. Tassoni said summarized my feelings pretty well on this. And the answer that he got from Mr. Phelps, with all due respect, if Mr. Phelps wouldn't make this investment himself on a personal level, I don't think that speaks volumes to me. And so, and I agree 100% with Dave Tassoni. And so, therefore, I can't find myself in support of this either. And so, with that, please call the question.
Are you making a motion to call the question?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we have a motion by Mr. Webster to call the question. May I have a second? I see Jean, I see Mrs. Crosby on the second. We have a motion and a second to call the question. That would end discussion. Any comments by board members on calling the question? Seeing none, are there any opposed to calling the question at this time? Seeing none, we've unanimously voted to end discussion by calling the question an affirmative vote. The item before the board is the NICDC host fee amount, and that is before the board. And with that, a yes vote passes it, a no vote defeats it. And I will ask Clerk Gumout to please call the roll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Village.
Yes.
Mr. Village.
Yes.
What?
Mr. Booker.
Yes.
Mr. Butita.
Yes.
Mrs. Crosby.
Yes.
Mr. Girl.
Yes.
That was a yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Gorel.
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman.
Yes.
Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. McDonald,
Yes.
Mrs. Red,
Yes.
Mr. Salgado,
No.
Mr. Schultz,
No.
Mr. Tassoni,
No.
Mr. Webster,
No.
Mr. Westcott. Is Mr. Westcott on the line? I think Mr. Westcott has left. Motion passes, Mr. Chairman. Only 4 noes.
You didn't get my vote.
I'm sorry, who was that?
It's Paul Arena. I'm a no.
I'm sorry, Paul.
That's all
What-
right. No.
Okay. Do we have that correct? A no vote for Mr. Arena, is that correct?
That is correct. Thank you. Now we have 5 noes.
Okay, thank you very much. Did we miss anybody else by mistake? Seeing none, motion passes. Thank you very much. Mr. Billing.
I have no other further matters. I just want to mention, we thank you everyone for your input today. And I want to thank John for the work that he's put towards putting on these loan programs. I mean, for an opportunity finally for some small businesses to possibly find some light at the end of the tunnel. It means more to this community than you guys could ever imagine. In these tough times with the majority of businesses operating at less than 10% of what they normally bring in, we're going to see a giant decrease in the amount of businesses that are around this area. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other unfinished business? Any other new?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Dave Tassoni.
Hi, Mr. Tassoni, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In just regards in past discussion regarding the vetting of the current vacancy and the board member, I would compliment you and appreciate the fact that you're trying to be candid about it and let the public and the board put a face with a name. It's just hard for me to get over, the way it has been, and with that. And I would also ask if Mr. Chapman on our next meeting or next time we gather, that he could give us his best update on where the county sits and what we might be up against in the future, dealing with our own financial trouble. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tassoni. We'll go ahead and note that to Steve. And any other new business? With that, I entertain a motion to adjourn, please. Mr. Girl on the motion, Mr. Salgado on second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Nope. Thank you very much. You guys have a great night. Be very safe, okay?
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Hasta mañana.
Hasta mañana.
Hasta mañana.